conversation on Twitter at VO Israel, Voice of Israel on Facebook, and of course our website voiceofisrael.com. In studio is Hadar, Sela, the managing editor of BBC Watch. BBC Watch, their modus operandi, if you will, is to monitor BBC coverage of Israel for accuracy and impartiality. She has a special interest in the influence of the media on the British public's perceptions of the Middle East and the Islamist networks operating in the UK. We've had her on the phone. Now we have her here in person, and it's an honor. Hadar Sela, welcome to the Josh Hasten Show, Voice of Israel.
Thank you, Josh. Lovely to be here.
So, a difficult week here in the Jewish world. Unfortunately, we have too many difficult weeks with terrorism in Europe, terrorism in this part of the world as well. But I want to focus on the media coverage. You focus exclusively, if I understand right, on the BBC, the most prominent, the largest. I mean, prominent, I guess, is a relative term. The largest media network in England, covering world news. Tell us the latest. What's going on in terms of the way the BBC is covering Israel in terms of current events? What's happening now in our world?
Well, the BBC, of course, isn't just the largest broadcaster in England. It's the largest broadcaster in the world, in fact, and the most influential. And that's why the BBC is so important. We've seen the recent attacks in Copenhagen. We've seen the ones before in France, in Paris, the Charlie Hebdo attacks. But of course, it didn't start there. It's a problem in Europe, the anti-Semitism that's been going on for a very, very long time. The British organisation, the CST, the Community Security Trust, which takes care of security for British Jews in the UK, recently put out a report and explained that, in fact, this was the worst year on record so far for anti-Semitism. And, of course, a lot of that was due to the events of the summer, the events we had here in Israel in the summer, the Operation Protective Edge, and the coverage of that operation definitely affects events in Europe. The all-party group on anti-Semitism in the UK, in the British Parliament, has also recently put out a report. And in that report, too, the BBC is cited. They say BBC coverage, the volume, just the sheer volume of BBC coverage, distorted people's picture of what was going on in the Middle East. So it obviously has a very, very important effect. And we're actually just in the final stages of organising a conference on that subject. It'll be here in Jerusalem on March 1st in the evening, 7 o'clock in the evening. And we'll be discussing how UK media coverage affects, how the coverage of UK media outlets of events here in Israel affects anti-Semitism in Britain. We can see a definite link. You can come along and join the conversation with us. It's at the Agron Guest House, and you can find the link to register on our website, which is bbcwatch.org.
Watch.org. And I want to talk more about the conference, but ironically, the things that you were saying in terms of the coverage of Israel, the amount of coverage of Israel, gives the possibility that the BBC and, of course, others can skew the coverage based on the sheer volume. And it's ironic to me how in several different instances that I'm thinking of just off the top of my head, you had the woman who was interviewed at the funeral for the Jewish victims there in Paris.
At the march.
Yeah, how
yes.
she was put on the spot, and
yes.
essentially, the way Israel treats the Arabs in this region was to blame for that attack. And then you had it again with a leading rabbi, I believe. I think this was actually Sky. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sky,
Sky,
yes.
Also, essentially accusing or blaming the anti-Semitism on Israel's policies, etc. I want you to comment on that. It's ironic because, on one hand, we are here saying that it's because of that sheer volume and the way things are skewed. That's the real reason that these incidents happen. And the BBC themselves aren't of course not blaming themselves, not looking in the mirror. They're blaming Israel for those incidents. I want you to comment on that, please.
I monitored very closely the entire coverage put out by the BBC during July and August this year, during the time of the Operation Protective Edge. viewers of BBC television actually saw nearly 3 times more filmed coverage from the Gaza Strip than they did from Israel. The last 2 weeks of the war, it was as if nothing had happened in Israel at all. There was very little coverage of the missile attacks here. There was very little coverage of what happened here. It was very one-sided coverage. You would think there was only something going on in Gaza. And since then, they're calling it the Gaza War. It's not the war that took place in Israel and Gaza. It's the Gaza War. You wouldn't know anything had happened in this country at all. So that obviously affects the way people see things. The event in Paris, where, just to recap for listeners, a BBC reporter was interviewing a lady who'd come to the march to show solidarity after the attacks on Charlie Hebdo and on the Hyper supermarket. And the lady was talking about the fears of the Jewish community in Paris, and the BBC reporter actually said to her, "Well, some people would say it's because of what happens in the no. Actually, he did say some people would say that Palestinians have suffered at Jewish hands, not even Israeli, Jewish hands. That's a very significant point, and it's actually an anti-Semitic statement. To blame Jews abroad for things that happened in Israel is according to the EUMC definition of anti-Semitism." It's anti-Semitism. There's been a lot of noise about that. There were a lot of complaints made to the BBC. The issue is currently under review. We're expecting an answer on the 28th of February, if I'm not mistaken. It will be interesting to see how the BBC reacts to that, because it was a very clear-cut case of anti-Semitism in a BBC broadcast, and of course, people were very upset by it.
And then there was another reporter, correct me or refresh my memory, who sent out a Twitter message. Was it Wilcox was his name, a reporter there from the BBC? Also, he said some controversial statements, tying in Israel. Do you know what I'm referring to there?
No.
So I'll have to go back and take a look at that. But in addition to the issue of volume in terms of the coverage of Israel, what about the actual content itself in terms of it being skewed? I've actually taken a reporter from the BBC back when we had Gush Katif in 2003, before the so-called disengagement, and she was telling me, and I don't know if things have changed. You tell me. She said, well, the Arabs, the Palestinians, actually say that it's the other way around, that the coverage is slanted pro-Israel. What would you say to that? And those are some of the complaints that the BBC apparently gets, that the coverage is too pro-Israel. What would you say?
They do get such complaints, and at least part of the time, some of those complaints are actually part of a political campaigning rather than genuine complaints. There's an organisation in the UK called the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which we can pretty much be honest and say makes the BBC's life a misery. And it's, a lot of it's from a political motivation rather than actual dealing with the journalistic side of things. But I think if you look at coverage, there are certain signposts. For instance, you will not see the BBC using the word terrorist when it talks about Israel. They never, ever use the word terrorist. It might be a gunman, it might be a militant. The attacks we had last November, there were these mysterious cars all on their own crashing into people in Jerusalem. There was no use of the word terrorist at all. It's another area I've studied quite a lot. In Northern Ireland, they do use the word terrorist. The shootings in Norway, the Andreas Breivik shootings, they do call them terrorism. Attacks against, there was an attack in Mali, I think, against some oil people a few years ago. That was terrorism. So there are places where there is terrorism, and there are places where there aren't. And of course, that's politically motivated. It depends on your politics, what you choose to call terrorism and what you don't.
So tell me, what you do in BBC Watch in terms of encouraging people to take action? What are some of the things you do? There are several organizations that deal with different elements in the media, different, they focus on different media outlets. What is BBC Watch? What is your mandate in terms of encouraging people to hold the BBC accountable for this skewed coverage?
So on our website, we highlight problematic reports from the BBC. We try very much to provide the facts that are very often missing so that people are aware of the whole story and of the facts, and they can use that in making their own complaints. The BBC has a very specific complaint system. It's not like other media outlets where you can just write a letter and get an answer. They have a very long, complicated, labyrinthine complaint system that you had to be pretty brave to even embark on in the first place. But people who do get results, we get corrections. Things are changed, not always with credit, but they change sometimes. And the idea is to empower the general public, to provide them with the information they need, so they can make their own complaints and make a difference.
Our time is short. We only have about another minute or so. Again, tell us about the March 1st event. How can people find out more about it and the crux of the event itself before we have to go?
Yeah, you can see it on our website on bbcwatch.org. There's a button on the side, give you all the details of the event. Our keynote speaker is Professor Robert Wistrich from the Hebrew University, the head of the Vidal Sassoon Center for the Study of Anti-Semitism. And we have Lucille Cohen, who was head of the Jewish community in Manchester for many, many years. Myself and my colleague Adam Levick, who is launching a new website called UK Media Watch. I do the BBC, he'll be doing the rest. And we hope to have a really interesting discussion, and please come along.
So I'll bring my complaints about Sky News to him then.
You will, yes.
Hadar Sela, managing editor of BBC Watch, monitoring the BBC's coverage of Israel. I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you that you came in studio today. It was a pleasure and an honor having you here face-to-face in studio. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Lovely to be here.
This is Josh Haston, Voice of Israel. We just have a few seconds left. Just to give you an update, I'm going to be ranting after the bottom of the hour news. I still have a lot to say about the Copenhagen terror attacks, and I put something out there on Facebook. You can go to my Facebook, Josh Haston, and check it out. I do actually have a page for the show itself, the Josh Haston Show on voiceofisrael.com. But check out my brief paragraph in which I described my reaction to the Copenhagen attack, and then I'm going to get more into that after the break. You don't want to miss that. You too can be involved in the conversation on Twitter at VOIsrael. VoiceofIsrael.com is our website, Voice of Israel on Facebook, and you can also call in the show 077-899-4111 here in Israel, 077-899-4111 in the U.S. and Canada. Good morning to you. 929-502-555s, 929-502-555. We will take a break now for the bottom of the hour news and be back with much, much more. Josh Haston, Voice of Israel. Don't touch that dial.
I'm a Zionist not because I'm a Jew, not because I've been to Israel, not because of everything that I've heard, but because of everything that I've learned.
This is Yishai Fleischer. Members of the ZOA Student Leadership Mission to Israel met me in studio here at Voice of Israel, and here's what they had to say.
It's very important that on campus we get the word out.
We're going to continue to be proud Jews, regardless of all the hate that we end up facing.
For the full interview, download the Yishai Fleischer Show on Voice of Israel.
Josh Haston here, Voice of Israel. We are live in Jerusalem. It is the 16th of February, 2015, 3:34 in the afternoon. Unfortunately, we have to start this segment with some bad news here. Very sad. Senior Citizens Minister Uri Orbach of the Bayit HaYehudi has died after doctors at Jerusalem's Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center tried to save his life. He was hospitalized in January for the treatment of rare blood disease from which he suffered. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Ruby Rivlin visited the minister on Sunday night before he passed away, survived by his wife and 4 children. Funeral is going to be held at 4:30 p.m. in Modi'in this afternoon, in about an hour from now. Just a little bit more on Uri Orbach. He worked as a journalist, writing for Yediot Achronot. He also co-hosted an army radio show called The Last Word, very popular show, an author of children's books and a dictionary of religious slang. Also the founding editor of the popular children's magazine called Otiyot, appointed the Minister of Pensioners' Affairs or Senior Citizens on March 18th, 2003. He lived in Modi'in, as I mentioned, and our very own Raoul Wootliff was at the Conference of Presidents meeting not too far away from where we're sitting here in Jerusalem just a few hours ago when Minister Naftali Bennett received word as he was up on stage addressing the group of Orbach's passing. He was handed a note, from what I understand, so Raoul was able to record what Naftali Bennett said on the life and legacy of Minister Orbach. We're going to play that very short clip for you here.
Just now I got a note that my dear friend, Minister Uri Shraga Orbach, Minister of Veterans, just passed away. Uri's a good man. Uri had a huge Jewish spirit. He's the guy that brought me into politics in something that's unheard of in the political realm. He actually said, "You come lead the party because we have to revive the party." Uri was a courageous man, civil courage, to stand up even when there's 20 people who think otherwise. Uri would stand up for his values, be it where it may, with good self-deprecating humor. I'm going to miss Uri, my older brother. May he rest in peace. Toda rabba.
There you have Minister Naftali Bennett referring to Uri Orbach, may he rest in peace, as his older brother. Again, the funeral will be held to be laid to rest at 4:30 p.m. in just about an hour in Modi'in. Switching gears, I want to go back to the Copenhagen terror attack from the other day. And again, I really want to thank Charlotte Thalmay for coming on the show, a survivor of the attack who was in the basement. If you missed any part of that interview, you're talking about somebody who survived that attack. You're going to want to go back to our website, voiceofisrael.com, in just a little bit in order to hear that interview in its entirety. But I want to talk about something that's been on my mind ever since the attack and the reactions I'm seeing, the Prime Minister's words, etc. The question I have for you, dear listener out there, is on the subject of Aliyah. Okay? We have the Prime Minister of Israel saying, Jews, it is time to come home. European Jews should immigrate to Israel. The Prime Minister opened his cabinet meeting saying that yesterday. But then you have, again, the chief rabbi of Copenhagen, and other leaders in the European community who are saying we should not be making Aliyah out of fear. We should be making Aliyah out of love. In other words, and again, I'm not, in terms of what Charlotte was saying, I wasn't going to challenge her on this. She just survived a terror attack. I wasn't going to get into a debate with her in terms of whether Jews should make Aliyah from Europe at this time or shouldn't make Aliyah. If now's the right time, should it be out of fear, out of love? But my personal opinion to all this, there are two pillars in Judaism, and I'm not a Torah scholar by any stretch of the imagination. There's so many rabbis around here, and they can add their 2 cents to this as well. But there are 2 basic pillars, okay, in Judaism. One of them is the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and everything that goes along with that. And the other aspect, the other pillar in Judaism is the land of Israel. And I believe, from what I understand, the way I was taught is they hold equal weight. In other words, God wants the Jews to live in Israel. So, again, out of fear, out of love, I think you should come home to Israel, regardless of what it is. If you're running away, I don't believe you should be ashamed to say, the situation here is bad, I am running away to Israel. Okay, my personal family in 1941, my grandfather decided they were going to run away. The others disagreed. We're going to let it, and I'm not comparing this time period to that period. Obviously, there's so many differences. But the majority, the intellectuals, they said, we're going to wait it out. Everything will be okay. They weren't necessarily saying we're not going to leave, go to Israel out of fear. The circumstances are a little bit different. But I believe that even if it's out of fear, you should not hold your head low. And now is the time to come home to Israel. Whether it's out of fear, whether it's out of love, whether you're from a Western country, whether you're from France, the Ukraine, or any of these other places in the world, or whether you're from New York or Florida, it doesn't make a difference. You do it out of love. You're a Zionist. You've come from the U.S. Things are okay for the moment, by the way, in the United States. Okay, listen to this, all right? Madison, Wisconsin, anti-Semitic and racial slurs and swastikas sprayed painted on 30 homes over the weekend. So you can say it's a one-shot deal, but we've talked about on the show this happening at college campuses all across the United States, this happening in Chicago, in Miami, etc., etc. So I don't know what the weight is. You can make a million excuses until I have $1 million, until this, until that. I'm going to do it out of love. I'm going to not do it out of fear. I disagree. This is the home of the Jewish people. It is time to come home. There's no shame at all in saying, I am doing this out of fear. My life is at risk. And that's my rant on that. If you disagree with all of that I just said, okay, I'm very passionate about this. I started it on Facebook this morning, essentially saying the same thing. And I don't know, it's up to like 100 different comments and people liking, people saying that I'm an Israeli snob and what right do I have to tell people where they should be living. Jews have rights to live everywhere in the world. They should have rights to live. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is two pillars. One is the Torah, one is Israel. This is one of the pillars just as important as the Torah. Ideally, of course, if we're all keeping the Torah and living in Israel, doing both of those, that's that's as good as it gets. If you can do both of those things, okay, there are plenty of non-religious Jews who live in Israel, okay, and don't keep all of the mitzvot or don't try to keep the mitzvot, etc. I understand that, but this is the place to be. The best of both worlds is keeping the Torah, being here in the land of Israel. That is a pillar, whether it's in fear, whether it's in love. This is your home. This is where you belong. If you disagree or you agree, send me a message on Facebook. Send me an email, josh@voiceofisrael.com. Feel free to do so. Now we're going to switch gears just here for a few more minutes, and then we're going to have Yarden Frankel, honestreporting.com. It is Monday here on the Josh Hasten Show. He will be in studio with me. Now, this is something that I don't actually care about. I mean, I do care about, but it's not really a story, but it is. And I'll explain. Speaker of the House John Boehner made a politically calculated decision not to inform the White House of his invitation to Prime Minister Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress. This reported by the Jerusalem Post, fearing that President Obama would attempt to obstruct his speech. This is what he said on Sunday. He said that he made a calculated decision not to let the White House know of his intention. However, I have a report here from January the 26th in which Speaker of the House Boehner said on 60 Minutes, we gave them a heads up that morning, meaning we gave the White House a heads up that the Prime Minister of Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, was invited to address the joint house. Which one is it? Which one is it? Did he tell the White House? Did he not tell the White House? I honestly don't care. And I'm tired of talking about it, to be honest with you, because this is not the issue. This is not the point. Iran is on the threshold of going nuclear. And we're worried about, did he or didn't he tell the White House? We're worried about the protocol. We're worried about the treatment in terms of the U.S., Israel. I understand they're our greatest ally. I understand the relationship is strong. But the focus now should be on the Iranian nuclear threat and not on did he or didn't he. So that's why, number one, I don't care about it, but I'm talking about it for you just to show you how far and how crazy this has become in terms of a story. Did he or didn't he? That's the only reason I brought it up. I don't care. It's not the story. Of course I care, because it's the issue of Iran, and that should be the focus, not this ridiculous protocol or threats. We're going to do this, this, and that if you don't tell us. All this craziness going on back and forth. Egyptian jets bomb Libya after the jihadists behead 21 Copts. Those are Christians down there from Egypt. If you see another one of these Hollywood-style gory ISIS videos they put out. Unfortunately, if it is a real video, if it is legitimate, then of course a horrible massacre caught on tape. As a response, again, 21 cops were taken down, marched down to some body of water, a river, an ocean, whatever it was, and their heads were cut off. In response, Egyptian warplanes today struck Islamic targets in Libya early Monday morning, hours after the video came out. A statement from the Egyptians said warplanes targeted weapons caches, training camps belonging to ISIS before returning safely. It said the strikes were to avenge the bloodshed and seek retribution from the killers. I'd like to see Israel get away with targeting, some country without the UN opening a Security Council or having a Security Council meeting at 4 p.m. on Christmas Day. If Israel were to defend itself or to take such action, the airstrikes came hours after jihadists posted again the gruesome footage of the beheadings of 21 Egyptian Christians on the internet, sparking outrage in Egypt and demands for revenge. So again, you've had Jordan then attack ISIS. You've had now Egypt attack ISIS targets as a result of these beheadings, lighting people on fire, and all that other horrible stuff that's going on with ISIS. At the same time, the Egyptians report that, according to the AP, that they discovered a security a smuggling tunnel, a 2.5 kilometer long smuggling tunnel from Egypt into Gaza, the longest passageway discovered in their crackdown on cross-border activity, cross-border smuggling. They say the tunnel was operated by obviously the Hamas